Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, baby. Hello and welcome to Tuesday, live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends. How are you? Welcome to the show today. It is the Tuesday edition of the big radio broadcast, which means Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is waiting in the wings for the weekly top three. We're going to get into three big topics that he believes are the most important topics of the week. And we're going to get into this, and it's going to be great. In hour two, Chris Story is going to come on board and share with us his thoughts and maybe a little bit of positivity, some life coaching lessons, and some self-analysis and thought. It's going to be fun stuff today. We've got a lot of stuff coming up on the program tomorrow. We've already starting to fill the week up. On Friday, first, I guess, Jacob Sullum from Reason Magazine is going to be joining us, followed by Chris Chang, Top Shot Chris Chang. Cassie Lover is going to be with us tomorrow on the program to talk about PACs, political action committees, and we're already working on stuff for Thursday as well. So it's going to be a fun week, and we're already getting into it. But before we have our dessert, we must eat the broccoli. That's right. We've got to have the hard stuff, and that's Brad Keithley. He's the broccoli purveyor here today on the big radio show for the weekly top three, and he joins us right now. Hello, Brad. How you doing?
Michael, I'm doing great. I didn't get the memo about red shirts today.
I was just going to say, did you not see the memo? Brad and I normally match for some reason. It's like two great minds think alike or something. But today we weren't on the same wavelength, so we don't have the same color shirts on today.
What's the word across the front? I can't make it out.
It says Copperworks Distillery. It's the distillery down there in downtown Seattle. It's a really, really cool place. If you ever get a chance to go to Seattle and have a few minutes, you should stop by. It's Copperworks. It's right there across from the aquarium. It's a cool little distillery right there in downtown Seattle. If you can get over the homeless people to get to it, you're fantastic. Anyway, Brad Keithley comes in every week to deliver us some great insight We always give Brad a hard time because, we make him. I mean, I feel like Brad should be like twirling his mustache, evilly in the background because he's giving all the bad news. But it's not all bad news. It's just truth. And sometimes it feels, sometimes hashtag feels bad, man. Sometimes the truth is hard. But that's why we have him on, because he brings in some good insight. So let's get started today, Brad. Of course, not really surprising what happened with the special session. We knew it was going to be close, and it was. It was just enough votes to get him over the threshold. But there's some insight that you're trying to bring to us on this as to, what do the votes mean? Double rainbow. What does it mean? The votes of people like Julie Colomb and Dan Sadler and David Nelson typify what's going on. Give us the full rundown here. What are we looking at?
Well, a lot's been said about the veto override. A lot will continue to be said about the veto override. And this segment isn't going to be just a broad brush. To me, as I look through the vote board, something really stood out at me that sort of defined the fiscal issues that we're facing in the state. It's sort of a microcosm of the problem that we've gotten ourselves into from a fiscal perspective. And the three votes that really stood out to me as I looked down the board was Julie Colomb's, Dan Sadler's, and David Nelson's. They stood out because those three have long since said that there are no taxes, that they are firm in the belief that Alaska can solve its problems by some means other than taxes, and they're anti-tax. Nelson, on top of that, says that he's pro-PFD, that he firmly believes, during his campaign, he said he firmly believes in a full PFD and would not take any votes against a full PFD. All three of them voted for taxes. All three of them in one of two senses, in the sense either that PFD cuts are taxes, and I believe they are, so they voted immediately for taxes, because the only way you pay for this increased spending that the legislature authorized through overriding the veto is through additional PFD cuts. Remember that it's not only that this bill was on the appropriation for this year, but the bill that the underlying bill they were voting on is now a permanent bill for increasing K through 12 spending. So if you believe that PFD cuts are taxes, and I think they are, and economists think they are, then they voted immediately for increasing PFD cuts, because the only way, in the absence of other revenues, the only way you pay for this spending is through PFD cuts. Even if you don't believe that PFD cuts are taxes, by taking even more of the PFD, they've moved us on the doomsday clock closer and closer to the point at which we run out of the PFD and have to move to taxes to pay for additional spending. So in that sense, in the long term, they voted for taxes as well. But Nelson, who you can view as the 45th vote, you can view as the deciding vote. I know some people want to say Forrest Dunbar was, to extol him for having come back from Poland, or others want to say others were the 45th vote. But I really think David Nelson was the 45th vote. David Nelson not only voted for taxes, he voted directly for PFD cuts, something that he said during his campaign he would not do. And I think they sort of capture the fiscal issues that we're going through. People talk a good game about, I'm going to hold the line. I'm not going to vote for taxes. I'm not going to vote for PFD cuts. I'm not going to vote for, any new revenues. I'm going to hold the line until they have to vote on the line, and they push the line. They push the line more in terms of additional spending and in terms of additional PFD cuts and additional taxes. And that's where we are. People don't walk the talk particularly in the case of Nelson, because he voted immediately for PFD cuts. People don't walk the talk that they make during their campaigns. When push comes to shove, they crater and do exactly the opposite of what they said they were going to do during their campaign. So how do you? There's no way out of this box. We're sort of building this box where people talk up a good game during the campaign. You vote for them, you support them, you give them money, you say that they're the right candidate on budget issues, the right candidate on fiscal issues. But then when it comes time, when push comes to shove, and it's time for their vote to go up on the board, they vote against themselves. They vote in the exact opposite way that they said they would during the campaign. And that's where we are, Michael. I mean, you can see it from the early 2010s all the way through to today, to 2025. You can see this collapse of virtually every representative during that, every representative and every senator, every legislator during that time. You can see the collapse that they'll talk a good game. Oh, they're fiscal conservatives. Oh, they're in favor of a balanced budget. Oh, they're against taxes. Oh, they're against PFD cuts. But when we get to where push comes to shove, when it's time to stand up and take to take a stand on that issue, they collapse. And we end up in a situation where we continue to spend more and spend more and spend more and spend more. If we're going to spend more, if that's indeed where we are, and it seems to be that's where we are, I mean, that's also what this vote typifies. If we're going to spend more, we need to develop the revenues to pay for it.
Yeah.
Because we're continuing to go deeper and deeper and deeper into deficits. If you look at, we've talked about this on the show before, if you look at the next 10 years, spending continues to go up. Revenues actually go down over the next 10 years because oil taxes are going down, something we've talked about the last couple of times on the show. And so the deficit already is getting just moving spending at inflation. The deficit already is projected to get deeper over the next decade, eating up more and more of the PFD, ultimately eating all of the PFD, and ultimately moving on to taxes. And so we're already in that situation. And now people pile on top of that by voting for things like this veto override. If you're going to do that, and this is sort of focused on David Nelson, if you're going to do that, then be honest about it and vote for revenues. Admit that you can't get off the
gravy train,
the link to spending, and start talking about reasonable, equitable, low impact revenues.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to watch because, the David Nelson was one of the surprising votes, although, as you said, many people could be called the 45th vote. Although it wasn't surprising, it's frustrating to watch somebody like Will Stapp ask in every meeting, how do we pay for it? How do we pay for it? He was asking all the right questions. And yet when it comes, the rubber meets the road at the end, Will Stapp votes to dip into the PFD and votes to do it. We've got, and I can understand in some ways, because as David Boyle in the chat room makes the point, he said, David Nelson was in a left-leaning district. He was fighting against Cliff Grow. It was a very close vote to get him in there, so he's trying to straddle a line. But Dan Sadler, who is totally different, he's in a very safe conservative district, and yet he vote. Again, no surprise, because Dan Sadler, he just waves in the wind as to whoever he talked to last. But that's the problem. We've got a lot of people who talk the talk, but when the rubber hits the road, they go in a completely different direction. Like you said, we're building ourselves this box where we buy into the madness that everybody says, and then when they get down there, they're like pod people. They get consumed, and they are just the thing and the whole thing. I mean, that's exactly what it's like.
Yeah, I'm not going to let David Nelson off the hook. I mean, yes, he is in a tough district, but he got elected on a platform that said he was a fiscal conservative. He was going to vote to preserve he was going to preserve the PFD. He was going to vote against taxes. That's what he said. That's what he got elected on. People who voted for him presumably voted for that platform. And then he gets down to Juneau and he abandons it. So yeah, I know he's in a tough district with Cliff Grow. I know that it's that some parts of it are left leaning, some parts of it are right leaning. Nelson got elected by saying he was a fiscal conservative. Nelson got elected by saying he was going to protect the PFD. Nelson got elected by saying he was no taxes. That's how he got elected. That's the platform on which he got elected, and he abandoned it. So I'm not gonna excuse him because he's in a tough district. In that tough district, he got elected on a platform that said no taxes, no PFD cuts, and he voted for both in voting for the PFD or for the veto override.
Yeah. No, I mean, no excuses. I'm just saying it's interesting to see how each and every one of these could have gone the other way. That's the thing. And you're right, 100%. David Nelson was the surprise to me of all the votes out there because we knew it was going to be close. And now it's not. Now it's said and done. And again, just a reminder, this was a one-time veto. They still were going to get $500 for the base student allocation. This was a one-time veto. And now, of course, we're on the hook in perpetuity for this $700 per kid, which is roughly $178 million a year from now until, well, we crumble into dust or whatever. That's what we're at right now.
Yep. It's faster than the rate of inflation. So we've just, if you look at the next 10 years and you say spending was going to go up by inflation, revenues are going down. I want to emphasize that for people who say, "Oh, we're going to, produce our way out of this." We're not. Revenues are going down over the next 10 years because of the way oil taxes work. We're escalating. We're escalating our problems just on the way it is, and now we've layered in with this bill that the governor tried to stop for a year through the veto. But with this bill, we've layered in a faster than inflation increase in K through 12 spending over the period. So this is it. This is the problem. So when people say, "Oh, you can't talk about revenues," okay, let's elect the right people. Let's elect the people that say they're going to hold the line. Let's elect the people that say no taxes. Let's elect the people that say no PFD cuts. We did that. And
wait, you're saying vote harder? Vote harder? That's always the answer, right? Vote harder, vote the right people. And yet we vote the right people in and the madness continues.
We did exactly that with David Nelson. We voted in the person who said the right things, who said he was going to stand up for the right things.
Yep.
And we've seen where that goes. So next time somebody says, "Oh, all we need to do is elect the right people," we done it. We tried. Not working.
Well, at least we know with somebody just made the point, at least we know with Cliff Grow, we at least know he's consistent. We know where he was going. We know where his vote was going to be. That's the problem with the fiscal conservatives, quote unquote, is because we can never tell which way they're going to blow in the wind.
Yeah. And Grow believes in revenues. And I know people get upset about that, but look, that's where we're going. The deficit's getting greater. David Nelson has made it even greater.
Yeah.
So that's where we're going.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Oh man, gonna get heated in here. We're gonna be back with more. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3 continues. Who were we talking to, folks? We talked to so many people here in the last week. Was it Shelley Hughes or was it Edna DeVries that said they wanted to bring Brad on as one of the financial guys in their administration? Brad, has anybody reached out to you? Because I can't remember who it was. Somebody said, I think it was, was it, folks, you have to remind me, was it Edna or Shelley that were like, I think it was Edna. It was like, yeah, we want to bring Brad on because he's got the great, I'm just like, okay. I mean, that's, that sounds like a great, It was Edna. Okay. Yeah. I mean, Brad, you're preaching to the choir here, brother. That's the thing. And we don't know any more than you. I mean, how do we fix it if we're going to send these jokers down there and they're going to roll over and wet on themselves and become one of the pod people? What's the solution? I mean, we, numbered the charter or change out the players. We did that. 65+% of the legislators have changed out since I wrote that little placard that says all the changes. And here we are.
Yeah. So the real answer is, and this vote encapsulates it. And David Nelson, more than any other, Colomb and Sadler also, but David Nelson more than any other really, really encapsulates it. You can't trust them. They're not going to do it. When push comes to shove, they're going to flip over. David Nelson voted the same way Cliff Grow would have. So, for the people who say, oh, Cliff Grow would be worse. No, he wouldn't. David Nelson voted the way Cliff Grow did.
Arguably,
and Cliff Grow at least recognizes if he's going to vote that way, he has to fill in the deficits in some fashion.
That's what I was just going to say. Arguably, Cliff Grow almost would have been better because at least he would have said, I'm going to vote for it, but here's the revenues we need to backfill it. I mean, at least he would have said that. I mean, not that I'm a fan of taxation and everything, but that's the thing. We keep getting suckered by these people that they go in there and they're like, oh, yeah, of course I'm a fiscal conservative. Of course I don't want. Yes, I'll vote yes. Go ahead. Yep. Give me more money. Just want to bang my head against this desk until I'm unconscious and then wake up and start again. That's what it feels like. I'm just beating my head against the desk until I'm unconscious and then we wake up and start again.
I mean, it's the same lesson we learned in 2019, right? The lesson in 2019 was the governor comes in, Dunleavy comes in, Dunleavy's going to veto us down. He's going to balance the budget against traditional revenues through vetoing down spending and a few other tricks along the way. And he comes in and he's going to do it. He couldn't get 16 legislators to back him up on the level of cuts he wanted to make. By the time it was all said and done, we were back up almost to where we had come in terms of spending.
I want to cut, but don't cut my area. Oh yeah, I'm all for cuts, but don't cut me. I mean, that's the thing. And you know what? And Dunleavy's not even off the hook. Shelley Hughes put out a press release after the vote and said, they could have looked at the governor's plan because the governor, his, and I hadn't read the full disc thing on but the governor's written plan that he wrote specifically for the special session included an automatic inflation escalator in the BSA. If they had given him what he wanted, he would have given them an escalator inside of. I mean, God damn. I mean, there is just nothing left that just spend. That's all it is.
And so when people get upset with me for talking about revenues, what the hell? We're not gonna hold the line. When you elect people like David Nelson, who says he's going to hold the line and then he doesn't, we're not going to hold the line. You can see the deficits building over the next decade. What the hell? You've got to start talking about revenues because there isn't any other way to fill that gap.
Because the PFD's gone. The PFD is gone. You just put $400 or $500 million a year into the school systems. That's the rest of the PFD moving forward. As it goes up, it's just, that's it. You're done. All right, we got to stop. I'm getting pissed off now. All right, we're going to continue here in just a minute. Brad Keithley, the weekly top three. I got nothing. Got nothing nice. FCC. All right, we're going to be back. Here we go. Jumping back into it. The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay. I'm trying not to get upset. Let's continue on. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Brad, some people just don't understand the PFD. And you've got a prime example of this. Now, full disclosure, I didn't read this full article that Brad is about to reference from the Daily News Miner because I, on principle, have just refused to give the News Miner any money, and they won't let you read a single article until you subscribe. So anyway, it's an article from Joshua Church, who's an investment advisor in Fairbanks, entitled "Alaskans Deserve a Smarter, Stronger Permanent Fund." Brad says, proof positive that some people just still don't understand it. Brad, give us the rundown here.
So this is the vampire segment of the
Good evening. Welcome to my house. Okay, got it.
of the weekly top 3, because this is a vampire that will not die, and I guess we're just going to have to keep pounding the stake into its heart over and over and over again to make sure it finally dies. The discussion of this issue had gone away for a while after we and others had raised issues with the permanent funds proposal, permanent fund corporation's proposal to eliminate the 2-account approach and go to a 1-account approach. It had gone away for a while, and I thought, well, okay, people finally are seeing the light. But oh no, here's an article in the Fairbanks News Miner, an op-ed in the Fairbanks News Miner from Joshua Church, extolling the permanent fund corporation's proposal to go from a 2-account system to a 1-account system. For those that don't recall, the permanent fund corporation, or the permanent fund, is set up under the Constitution as a 2-account system. There's the corpus that is not to be spent, not to be invaded, not to be used in any way, shape, or form. That's to be invested to spin off earnings. That earnings go into the 2nd account. The what's called statutorily is the earnings reserve account, and the only spending that is authorized is from the earnings reserve account. The legislature can go in and appropriate money from the earnings reserve account. That's the 2-account system, and it was set up that way to protect the corpus, to say you cannot absolutely ever spend from the corpus. That's what the Constitution says. Maybe they left out one ever, but you cannot spend from the corpus, and you can only spend from the earnings reserve. The Permanent Fund Corporation comes along, and the Permanent Fund Corporation is saying, that's out of date. What we need to do is we need to merge the 2 accounts together into a single account that will spin off earnings, and the legislature can spend those earnings, and we can and we will set the level at which, by constitutional provision, new constitutional provision, we will set the level at which they can draw from this single account, and that will guarantee revenues to the state, and it will, in their terms, protect the permanent fund. Well, the problem with that is that that's all assumes that the Permanent Fund Corporation earns, in its investments from the permanent fund, earns an amount at least equal to the amount that's being drawn out to be spent, the amount that's set by constitutional provision now, that's being drawn out to be spent by the legislature. If the Permanent Fund Corporation doesn't earn that amount and that's being spent, the constitutional provision that's been proposed nevertheless continues to draw that 5% from the permanent fund and continues to fund the legislature to spend it. So if the Permanent Fund Corporation isn't earning the 5%, but they're nevertheless drawing the 5% out, what's going on? That permanent fund is being drained. It opens a back door into the permanent fund corpus. Doesn't say it does, but right, by allowing a 5% draw, even though the Permanent Fund Corporation isn't earning 5%, it opens a back door into the permanent fund. And over time, if you look back over time, the Permanent Fund Corporation has not been earning, for several years now, has not been earning the 5%. If you look forward, they're barely earning the 5%. under circumstances that they get to describe. Oh, we think we're going to continue to earn 5%. And so it's creating this system where you've got a backdoor into the permanent fund. So those who are advocating this system, when you think about it, what they're really doing is they're setting up for the day when you can't cut permanent funds anymore, permanent fund dividends anymore. You're out of money. Yep. And they're setting up, and the permanent fund corporation is not earning 5%. They're setting up for the day where they can start drawing from the permanent fund in order to supplement revenues, and keep on spending. Those who advocate spending growth are big advocates of merging these two accounts together. Those who want to avoid taxes, the top 20% who aren't paying any taxes now, want to continue that in perpetuity, are big advocates of this. Commonwealth North, which Joshua Church cites in his op-ed, is a big advocate of it for that very reason, to continue the gravy train, even if the permanent fund corporation isn't earning 5%. And so it is all set up to create a backdoor into the permanent fund, into the permanent fund corpus. They try to justify this by saying, well, the earnings reserve isn't getting enough now. Well, yes, because it's not earning 5%. The permanent fund corporation is not earning 5%. And the rationale in the existing constitutional provision is, if you're not earning enough to support the earnings reserve, then you should stop spending from the earnings reserve. There's a hard wall there. You can't go into the permanent fund corpus. The one account system would allow them to go into the permanent fund corpus. So let's be clear. Whenever Joshua Church or anyone who are writing, op-eds that support the proposed merger into the one account, whenever they're doing that, what they're really saying in the subtext is, hey, we need a backdoor into the permanent fund because we're not confident the permanent fund corporation is going to continue to earn this 5% like they haven't been the last few years. Right. We're not confident they're going to continue to earn it. And so we need a way to get into the corpus.
And, well, tell me if I'm wrong, Brad. Here's how they're going to sell it. Well, unless you want to tax, we need to combine the funds. Unless you want to be taxed, and Alaska is so tax adverse. And again, I'm not a fan of taxes, folks. Don't hear me wrong. But I'm telling you, this is where we're going. We're going to some form of, we're already being taxed on the PFD. I know, I'm waiting for Randy to jump in and tell me how that's not right. We're already being quasi-taxed on the PFD. But here's what they're going to do. They're going to say, well, unless you guys want to be taxed, we really need to roll this up together. No, and people will just blindly jump on that bandwagon because they won't see the truth. And the truth is, to dumb it down for the rest of us, is that they're trying to eat the seed corn. They're trying to strangle the golden goose that's laying the golden eggs, and they're trying to strangle it. That's what happens. If they get access to the corpus, they will slowly eat away at it until there's nothing, and then we will have no permanent fund. They'll drain the permanent fund down to 30 or 40 billion dollars, and then they'll have to tax us anyway because there's not enough money coming out of it. That's where we're. Am I wrong, Brad?
No, but that'll be a couple of generations off.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll take them a while to get down to the $30 billion. So those who currently in existence will be fine because we'll just drain the permanent fund on down. But what we're doing is we're setting up a huge problem for future generations in being able to fund themselves in Alaska. I mean, the Commonwealth North and others say, "Oh, we're looking out for future generations. That's what we're really about. We're looking out." No, you're not. You're looking out for yourselves. You're looking out for your top 20% selves in trying to get access into the permanent fund corpus. So again, it's sort of like this is the vampire segment. We've put that stake in the heart once before. We've put it in several times over the course of these programs. Evidently, we have to keep putting it in because you got people like Joshua Church, who says he's an investment advisor. It makes me a little curious about that. People like Joshua Church who are out there advocating for continuing to advocate for this one account system.
I'm wondering if, as an investment advisor, he would advise that his clients invest in the permanent fund rather than the S&P 500. Because the S&P or the Harvard fund or any of these other funds that are generating 8 to 10% every year, and the permanent fund struggles to generate. I wonder where he's advising that people invest their money. I wonder if he's going to put his whole portfolio into the permanent fund. I mean, dude, this is madness. This is total and complete and utter madness. What's going on here? There's just no more common sense here. And like you said, it'll take 2 generations. And I think ultimately that's the goal. The goal here is just to kick the can down the road until whoever's in power now is retired and living in Hawaii or someplace else, where they could be like, well, I got mine. And so they'll deal with whatever they need to deal with. And whoever's left in Alaska, turn the lights off on the way out, because that's what we're going to end up with.
Yeah, it converts. I mean, there's various ways to put this, but it converts the permanent fund into an impermanent fund, an unpermanent fund.
Yeah.
And the permanent fund was originally set up by those in the 70s and 80s to be there for all generations of Alaskans, in terms of the PFD, and be there for all generations of Alaskans, to be permanent. And then the key part of this is going to a single account makes it impermanent because of the way they're setting up the draw, regardless of whether the permanent fund corporation earns enough to pay for the draw or not.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. We got more coming up. We'll be back right after this. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Number 3 is dead ahead. Maybe one of those who voted for the override maybe we still have some hope. I don't know. We're going to see what Brad has to say. We'll continue with more in just a moment, right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Brad Keithley is our guest. I've got a comment here. Henry just continues to go on, and I've been pretty patient with Henry overall. But when he's like, this is getting ridiculous, lots of shiny objects over here, nothing to see here, Brad Keithley, right? Dumb and Dumber. Only 7 likes, that proves this show needs improvement. Henry, nobody's buying your bullshit. Okay, I understand you're on this whole global unrestricted warfare, immigrants bad, the whole thing. I understand all that. But every time you jump in the chat room, you drop a novel in the comments about how all this stuff, and you don't read the room. You don't see what we're talking about. Hey, if you don't like the show, hit the skids, brother. Hit the skids, right? Because you're not even reading the room. You're never contributing to the conversation. You're only hearing what you want to hear. So if you don't like it, bye-bye. All right? Just go. I don't care. But don't criticize the guests and don't criticize the show. If you don't like it, there's plenty of other things to watch. Plenty. I'm sure that there's somebody out there, just jump into some chat room where everybody's talking about the global conspiracy of whatever is going on. I'm sure you could find it somewhere. Meanwhile, we're trying to talk about certain issues, and that's what I'd like to discuss with you and the other. If you want to stay and talk about this issue, let's stay and talk about this issue. Otherwise, bye-bye. Okay? Lord, I don't even know. I don't even know what to say. If you don't like it, goodbye. Sorry. He's not the day to push my button today. I'm just saying. Today's not the day to push my button. So, Brad, you didn't get reached out to by Edna, right? I mean, no. Okay. All right. Well, and you know what? I've been preaching the gospel of Brad Keithley to Bernadette. I mentioned it to Shelley. I've mentioned it to all this, I mean, the things with the permanent fund and the spending and all this stuff. And I don't know. I feel like I'm getting a lot of lip service, even to candidates that I'm kind of liking what they're saying. Again, I'm fearful, just like the David Nelsons, that they're saying all these great things, and yet when it times, when it's time to hit it's going to be more of the same. That's my fear.
Yeah, and Shelley, I mean, we talked about this last week on the show, right? Shelley has the perfect opportunity because she was a member of the Fiscal Policy Working Group, because she has touted the Fiscal Policy Working Group in the past as an example of how she can work, how she and others can work to bring things together. She has the perfect opportunity to talk about things like balancing revenues with spending. If you're going to continue to spend, you have to have revenues. That's part of what the Fiscal Policy Working Group said. And so she has the ability to do that, I think, in a way that the other candidates can say, but Shelley was a part of the group, the legislative group that brought that together. And so if she wants to use, have an example of how she can participate in a group that brings things together and has an overall comprehensive approach, that's the perfect opportunity. If she's not leaning on that, if she's not saying that, then you really got to wonder. I mean, if we're ever going to get to a solution.
Did you catch the interview with her on the program?
I did not.
Okay, so because I asked her specifically that question about the fiscal policy, where I set up the question perfectly. She could have taken it and said, yes, it's a perfect plan. We could have, perfect framework. We could have used. She walked right around it. She just kind of, dodged right around. She went on to the Sunset Commission and some other stuff, which is a great thing. I think the Sunset Commission is a great thing. Don't get me wrong. It's a valuable piece of what we're talking about. But she didn't embrace it. And that's just.
Michael, some people like to say that ranked choice voting is working. And so it's bringing everybody toward the middle. It's really not. I mean, the reason that Shelley would walk around the Fiscal Policy Working Group is because it talks about revenues. And she looks at what she needs to get into the top four. And she doesn't want to be talking about revenues because that sort of affects her core. So it's driving those people, when they look at what they need to get into the top four, it's driving those people to more extremes because they have to appeal to even a smaller segment to get themselves into the top four. I think it's working in the exact opposite way that Scooter Kendall claims it's working. That's driving people in the middle. I think it's driving people more to the extremes.
Well, like you said, I mean, I'm starting to come to we only got 30 seconds here, but I'm starting to come to the conclusion that, you know what? We might as well just ride this pony right into the ground. I might as well just sign up for every program and take every government dollar I can until this whole thing collapses, because that's where we're going. And nobody wants to acknowledge that there is an end to this madness that does not end well. Let's just put it that way. All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Let's go. Please like and share. Hey, Henry said I only have 7 likes, so you guys must hate me. Please do something. Here we go.
Public enema number 1. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number 1, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. He's really got me going today, guys. He's really got me going. All right, number 3 of the weekly top 3 might surprise some of you. It might surprise some of you. Bill Elam's take on personal responsibility is actually resonating in part with Brad, even though Bill Elam voted to override the governor. So, Brad, what do you mean by this? He's got an opinion piece, which I'll drop the link to in the Peninsula Clarion, which is actually a very good piece. I did read it. And but what's your take on this right now? Because there's a lot of people who've already mentioned Elam in the chat room several times this morning to say he's joined the dark side. He's got this, he's got that. And again, I wouldn't have voted the way that he voted. But then he turns around and puts this opinion piece together, which seems at odd with his vote in some way. But tell me what your thoughts are, Brad.
So Elam, Elam voted the wrong way. He voted for increased taxes and increased PFD cuts, and I don't understand that. But let's set that aside for the moment, because I think he has his opinion piece has the kernel of a very good idea. The opinion piece in both the Clarion and the Juneau Empire, since they're owned by the same organization anymore, they're now publishing cross pieces between the two. The opinion piece is education accountability starts at home, not just in Juneau. And in some fashion, I think this is his response, Elam's response, to getting a lot of heat about K through 12 and about the votes on K through 12 and positions on K through 12 policy and statewide policy and things like that. The pushback is, look, the Kenai Borough controls, or the Kenai Borough School Board controls the Kenai Borough K through 12. They're the local institution in control of it. They set the local policies. They finance, the Kenai Borough finances a significant share of the local school board. So the local school district. So you really ought to be looking not only at him as a representative to do whatever people want him to do at the state level. You really ought to be looking to the local school boards and local funding as a way of affecting change or controlling the outcomes in the local districts. And I started to think about that, and I went back to an issue we discussed several years ago when the state was still funding a significant share of new school construction. You remember the old issue of the state funds new school construction, so why do the local districts care? They want a gold-plated new school because that's going to be paid for by the state. It's not going to be paid for by the local district. And our point at the time was more and more of that cost needs to be shoved onto the local district because they're the ones making the decision, and they ought to bear the burden of any decisions they make to gold plate a new school, that their district ought to pay for it. The school board ought to be on the line for making a decision to do that. And the state did that plus or minus over a period of several years by reducing the state contribution to new school construction. That's sort of the same thing. As I read Elam's column, it started striking me that that's really part of what we ought to be doing with school funding. We ought to be pushing more and more of the responsibility to the districts because the districts are able to get the spending under control. Excuse me. If there's too much administration and the state's funding it, the local school district doesn't care because the state's paying for that excess administration. But if there's too much administration and the local district is paying for it, local taxpayers are paying for it, then there's going to be pushback on too much administration. There's going to be an effort to cut that administration down. If there's only so many dollars out there and you have to make choices between this sort of spending or that sort of spending or this sort of program or that sort of program, if that's decided at the state level, then the local districts don't care. Give it all to us, so we can spend it on everything we want. But if the local district is having to pay for it, then you get more choice, more decision making about, well, maybe we don't need that, or maybe we can use less of that, and have more to spend on things that we do think are important. That led me to do a little bit of research, which I need to do more of to really turn this into a column or turn this into a theme. But that led me to do a little bit of research on how Alaska compares in terms of local funding compared to state funding to the nation overall. And what I found interesting, the census actually does an analysis of this. What I found interesting was nationwide, about 13% of overall school funding comes from the federal government. That's going to be going down under the Trump administration, but to date, about 13%, not as big as I thought it would be, but about 13%. The remainder is split almost evenly nationwide. is split almost evenly between the state and the localities. The states nationwide pick up about 45% of overall school funding. The localities pick up about 43% of overall funding. According to the census data, which breaks this stuff out by state, Alaska is different. Alaska has roughly 55%. So Alaska has roughly 21% coming from the federal government, higher than the overall average. Alaska has, of the remainder, Alaska has 55% coming from the state, more than 55% coming from the state, and less than 23% coming from the locality. Alaska is one of those states, and there are several, but one of those states that are heavily state dominated in terms of state funding. And as a consequence, when a local district looks at choices, they're really looking at, oh, well, we need more money from the state to do this because we don't want to make a choice ourselves. We just need the state to send us more money. I think Elam's onto something. This isn't where he went in the op-ed, but it's the kernel that started from when he started talking about we need more local control, more local voices, more local activity, more local involvement with respect to K through 12. I think Elam's onto something in talking about we need to push more of not only the responsibility, but the cost for K through 12 spending onto local government, and have local government have to bear not only get to make the decisions about where the money is spent, but also have to raise the money.
Right.
And that will force them then to make choices in a way that they're not doing now.
Well,
I think that's reflective of where the nation as a whole is.
Well, I think the problem here is that they've had access to all this money for so long that none of them have been forced to face the fiscal reality of you have to live within your means. That's the problem. The state has been the spigot for so long. We've had so much money that they've just been like, well, we never have to worry about fiduciary responsibility. We just, you give us the money and we spend it. And that's where we're at right now. When you got 55% coming from the state, a 20% coming from the federal government, they've just been living, they've been living high on the hog. And there's no school boards who are who are having to live within their means at this point. And that's the reality we're going to have to face.
Yeah, I think Elam really, I mean, maybe he didn't intend to go there, but I think Elam's onto something in terms of talking about pushing more responsibility and more burden back on the districts, so they have to make the choices about their local school districts. I grew up in a state which is almost the reverse of Alaska. Had very little state funding, had a lot of local funding, and so there were a lot of local decisions that had to be made. And if you wanted to increase spending one place and talk about going to the taxpayers, that created a stop on that additional spending. And I think looking at something like that for Alaska in the current environment certainly is making a lot of sense.
Brad Keithley of Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Wrap up 1 minute here. Final thoughts for today.
Well, big disappointment in the veto override. Not so much the additional spending, but the people who voted for the additional spending, claiming to be fiscal conservatives, claiming to be anti-tax, claiming to be pro-PFD, caving and ultimately voting for the additional spending. If that's where we're going, and that seems to be where we're going, that people cave when push comes to shove, that's where we're going. That increases the need to be talking about revenues, because we got to pay for this somehow.
Yeah. Jeffrey makes a good point, Brad. We need a robust private economy to get to that style of school funding. And that's part of the problem. We've become such a dependency state in so many ways. This is the trickle-up effect of all that dependency state stuff, for sure. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Brad, thanks for coming on board.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Folks, we got to go. We got more coming up. Hour 2 dead ahead. But that's the problem, right, Brad? I mean, Alaska is a dependency state. We're dependent on federal dollars. We're dependent on state dollars. At every level, we become dependent, and we think that the well is never going to run dry. And now that we're down at the bottom, scraping for rocks and everything else and just bringing up mud, we're, people are in a panic. How do we make this? How do we stretch this further? They don't want to face the fiscal reality of you've got a declining enrollment, you've got less money coming in, you've got poor outcomes. They don't want to talk about any of that. They just
they want to shove it off on the state. They want the state to just appropriate more and more and more and more, and take them off the hook. I mean, local control is best, right? State control is better than federal control. Local control is better than state control, because when you are on a school board, that's what I found when I grew up. Where I grew up, when you are on a school board, you have to go face, your peers in the local cafe, and they say, "Wait, you're going to raise my taxes? I'm not going to put you back in office." When you have that local responsibility and local burden, you tend to make much more conservative fiscal decisions. And when you can say, "Oh, well, that's off in Springfield in the case of Illinois, or that's off in Juneau in the case of Alaska. I don't have any control over that. I know how to spend it, but they need to send me more so Johnny can have this and that and that." Right. Instead of making choices. I think Elam's got a good point about pushing more of that responsibility down to the localities.
Well, and we've got a participatory problem too, right? Because David makes the valid point. Local control equals NEA bought and paid for school boards, only if the local individuals are not engaged, right? And remember, government happens to you when you're not paying attention. We've been so comfortable and fat, dumb, and happy, and there's been so much money flowing. We've just kind of unplugged as an electorate, as a people. We're just like, oh yeah, we got the money. We'll let somebody else handle it. And then the special interests come in and they set up shop and they start leeching off the system. And then they don't want to let go. They don't want to let go. They don't want to let that money train go. And so then they use that money against you. And this is where we're at in the state of Alaska.
Yeah. And I think it's the reverse of what David's thinking. I mean, I think if you have local responsibility, if your property taxes in Anchorage were going to go up, another 20% to fund what the school board wanted to do, what the NEA school board wanted to do, I think there would be pushback on the NEA school board and on the NEA school board elected members in wanting to do those programs. I think just like we experienced when we have the state funding the new school construction and people going, "Oh, well, I want this and I want that and I want that and I want that and I want this," really turning it into a local construction program. When we had the state funding that, I think we saw a change when more responsibility for that got pushed back to the local district. I think the same thing would be true if we push back more responsibility for the operating budget, the school operating budgets, back to the local district. So Bill Elam may not appreciate the credit for this thought, and it's a little bit different from what he had in the column, but I think it's a good thought, and I think it's one that we'll be talking about more on the show as we go along.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. And again, that's the thing. These systems have created these the power structures and the power bases, like I said, because we have been unplugged, because we're not contributing at the local level as they are in other states to the same level, because we're not being affected in the same, because it was free money.
Right.
And we feel like we're not affected. Oh, sure, I'd like a new swimming pool. Oh, sure, I'd like a new building. I mean, we don't have to pay for it. So sure, who wouldn't want more free stuff? But when the gravy train is grinding to a halt and the systems who have latched onto the system to leech off of it and created whole business models based around that, be it construction or education or whatever, all of a sudden they start panicking and utilizing that money to convince you that what you're doing is the right. We've got to keep doing it. The train cannot continue. And until we bolster the private economy to the point to where we feel that direct connection between what the spend is and what our taxes are, we're not going to feel that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the point about, we need a stronger private economy. Yes, we do. And maybe this would be one way to encourage it. If we push more responsibility down to the localities say we need a stronger private economy. And that starts resonating as an issue. As long as the state is the sugar daddy for all the school districts, as long as it's the source of the bulk of the money going to the school districts, there is no need for a push for a private economy in the local districts, because they got the state funding it all. If we change that dynamic and the state and the localities have to pick up a significant share of the burden, like happens elsewhere in the country, and the states have to pick up a significant share of the burden, then the localities start thinking about, well, how do we build our private economy so we can have a tax base so that we can afford the schools that we want if we no longer have the state to leech off of?
And of course, special interest begets special interest. You know, they're going to put their people in there, and because people are not paying attention, that's what we get. People who are just like, you know, the more money that goes in, the less attention they pay, because they're like, it's not my money. I don't care.
Yeah.
How do we get them engaged? How do we get them
and taxes reverse that. Local taxes reverse that by engaging the localities, the local people in the decision making, because it's going to affect them. It's going to affect their pocketbook directly.
I hate the fact that you're making sense on this. Really, because again, I dislike taxes at so many levels, but at this point, is it the only way we're ever going to get them under control? I hate that. But
that's what David Nelson voted for. He voted for more taxes because he voted to continue the spend without revenues to match it. So we got to have some way to close the gap.
We'll see. All right, Brad Keithley, thank you, my friend. Appreciate it.
As always, Michael, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show continues. Hour 2 is dead ahead. Right here.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com. That's where you'll find the audio-only live stream, as well as links to Facebook and YouTube and Rumble and all the places where we simulcast the show each and every morning. You can come on there and you can join us in there where the chat room is. We got about 65 people this morning hanging out with us, commentating and talking about all the various things that are going on out there. We appreciate you guys coming on board and being with us. We love having you here. And we're going to continue. Also, of course, broadcasting live around the state on plain old terrestrial radio, which is, we love that. That's it's my life. It's my life. This is your favorite radio station and or FM translator. And we appreciate you guys coming on board and sharing with us. I hope you tell more folks about the show. If you've enjoyed the conversations and you've learned something new, I would hope that you would reach out and tell your friends and family and relatives and coworkers about the show, to, get more engaged, to get more involved, to learn more about how the state works and everything else. That's what we try and do. This show is not about sound bites, right? You'll notice that I always, I always attempt to have guests on for a full hour. Why? Because I believed and have believed for years, if you've listened to this show, that long form is the answer, to get down into the details of things. That sound bites don't do anybody any good. Thumbnail sketches of how things work is not the way to do it. We need to get down into the weeds. And that's probably hurt me as maybe the popularity of the show over the years, because I know it has, because when I was in Anchorage, I didn't have full creative control of the show. I kind of signed part of that over when I took the deal in Anchorage to do morning radio there. and it was a 3-hour show, and they made me segment it out in 20-minute segments so that I only, and so I know that people's attention span is just not there. But that's not the show that I want to do. I don't want to just do, 10-minute hit with somebody and get the talking points and then move on to the next topic. I want to dive down into what's going on. I want to dive down into, I want to know why things are happening the way they're happening. And to do that, sometimes you got to get under the hood and you got to start ripping and tearing. You got to figure out what's going on. And you can't do it in a 10 or 15-minute conversation. You really can't. And there is obviously a demand for that. I mean, you look at somebody like, for example, Joe Rogan, who has a 3-hour podcast with somebody. Now, I'm not talking about doing that, but I mean, so there is some desire for that kind of long form. But if you get anything out of this show, I would hope that you would share it with your family members and your friends and your coworkers and people around you and say, if you want to know what's going on in the state, here's the place you can go. Not that we're right 100% of the time, but we're at least digging into the issues. And that's part, and especially since the lack of coverage in this state by the so-called mainstream news media in this state is so lacking. I mean, there's just no deep dive into the issue. There's no breakout. There's no analysis. There's no give and take on both sides of the issue. And it's very frustrating to watch. We just finished up with Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. And we always joke and banter with Brad that, he's the whip master. He comes in and beats us with the truth, and then we're all upset and agitated. We have one guy that comes into the chat room every Tuesday morning and says, "Oh yeah, I forgot it's Brad. Well, I'm out. I'll see you guys tomorrow." He doesn't want to hear what's going. And I mean, I guess that's fine. You choose you. But the problem is, whether you agree with Brad's ultimate premise or his ultimate conclusion, he's always pulling something out that lets us understand what's happening in the state and where we're going. And I'm always getting, it's why I continue to bring Brad onto this. Brad's been on the show now for 10 years. All right. 10 whole years we've had Brad on the show, and I've slowly expanded. He used to only do like a 20-minute segment back when I was on morning radio in Anchorage. And I just continually expanded it until we could have a full-on discussion with what I wanted to do. And this is part of the problem, is that we have got the public at large has got a shorter attention span. And so, and in Alaska specifically, and I'm going to get into this in just a minute because I want to pick apart this article that Bill Elam wrote a bit and talk about it. But part of the problem is, in the state of Alaska specifically, we have an electorate that is just not engaged. Now, listeners to this program or to many of the local talk, there is a slice of people out there, super voters, et cetera, et cetera. There are a slice that are engaged and they do understand, but we are a small minority. You could see that in just the election turnouts of the various communities around the state. We are a very small, we like to think of ourselves as, oh yeah, everybody thinks like us. No. In fact, most of the people in the state are not paying attention to what's going on. Most people in the state are just fat, dumb, and happy, and they're like, oh, it's all good. They do their duty, right? They go to the voting booth on the voting day and they pull the lever, and they're like, that's us. I've done it. That's my duty for the year. And then they go away and don't pay attention for the remainder of the year. Or they read the headline and the bullet line underneath of it, the slug that goes on underneath the headline, the subheading, and they feel like they're educated on what's happening. And again, because of our lack of journalistic integrity or work ethic, I guess, in this state, I would say that seems really harsh, but I'm kind of pissed off today. And you know what? It's frustrating when you get a story and you can't get both sides of a story from from somebody who labels themselves as a journalist, and they can't get both sides of the story in an equally weighed and balanced mean, I mean, what else are you supposed to think? The problem is in this state is that we have been living so high off the hog for the last 40 years that we just can't acknowledge that gravy train may be coming to an end. And we've got a whole generation now who have lived, I mean, my generation, I'm 55 years old, soon to be 56 years old. I'm 55 years old, and my generation who grew up in the school systems in Alaska, who graduated in the 80s, who went, we may have been touched by the housing crisis and the savings and loan crash in the early 80s and everything else. But by the time we hit the 80s and into the 90s, Alaska's, prosperity just continued to grow. And over the course of the late 90s and into the early 2000s, we boomed. Right? We had more money than God. We were like, whatever you need, you want, you get a football field, and you get an AstroTurf field, and you get an Astro track, and you get a pool, and you get a school. Everybody was getting money. And what we've created is a situation, and I'm just using the tracks as an example. There was plenty of other types of programs and monies that went out there. Plenty of monies that went out at every level of the state. And so we've got a whole generation of people who were like, oh, it's fine. It's fine. It's no big deal. Whatever you want it's all free. We don't have to pay for it. Okay, great. Yes, of course we'd love a new who's-y what's it, whatever it is. Whether it's a football field or a school or a swimming pool or whatever it is that of course, we don't have to pay for it. Of course we want it. And so here we are. This is what we have wrought. These are the seed. We've sowed it, and now we're reaping it. A whole generation of people who are disengaged from what's happening, who don't understand the deeper aspects of the private economy and the public economy are completely divorced from one another. That there is a community of self-interest around the public economy because they've kind of siloed themselves away from everything else, and so they're just doing everything they can to continue to bolster their own ends, regardless of what happens in the private economy. And because we have been so antithetical to any kind of personal connection to these two economies in the form of taxation, and I'm talking about taxes now, because we've been so resistant to any form of taxes, we have willingly allowed them to grow the size and scope of government and take things that heretofore would have been unthinkable. Now, you'll remember when they turned off the income tax in the state of Alaska, that Jay Hammond at the time said, look, turn the rate down to zero. Turn the rate down to zero, but don't take it off the books, because if you do, here's what's going to, and he outlined exactly what's happening now. That it would be nearly impossible, because first of all, he talked about it being a connector between the public, the private citizens, and the government. He talked about it being that connector, that was, it's a pain point, right? It's a pain point. People feel connected to it. And I'm not an advocate for taxes. But at this point, because we are so divorced from how our government is funded and everything else, we have no clue as to what's going on. I've said it once, I'll say it 1,000,000 times. If you really want to get the government in check in the state of Alaska, what you would mandate, and this will never happen. Okay, this is a thought experiment. This is not a true possibility. But just as a thought experiment, just think about it for a minute. The royalties, the revenues, if we are true owners of the state resource collectively, if we are true owners of the state resource collectively, then those monies should flow directly to us. And then the government would then, issue a tax bill to pay for the services and the level of government that we want. Because, that's how it works in 49 other states, by the way. That's how it works everywhere else except for here. So again, play the game with me. This is the thought experiment. If we received those royalties, revenues, taxes, if we received them directly as owners, every man, woman, and child in the state of Alaska would be issued a check for 20, I don't know, Donna's in the chat room. What do you think, Donna? 23,000 maybe? $23,000 per person? And you'd be like, wow. Wow, yeah, you're right. Family of 4, that's a chunk of money, right? Then the government would come in and issue us a tax bill for the current level of government that we are receiving. And that tax bill would be about $18,000, $19,000 per person. So it was really great when you got that $23,000 check, but then you'd get a tax bill for 90% of it. Do you know how fast the spending in the spending in this state would come to a screeching halt? Do you understand how fast the wheels would come off the bus at that point? But because we're so disconnected from how our government operates, because we are so insulated from how the revenues work and everything else, we just blithe along, fat, dumb, and happy. See, I was close. Donna says 22,000 per person would be the payout. 22,000 would be the payout, and the bill would be right in the $20,000 range. So you'd have thought, I'm in high cotton until you got that $20,000 bill. That's the problem. And it begets a dependency state where we, one, are not paying attention to how the state gets their revenues or their money. Two, we're really not paying attention to how they spend it because it'll always be there and there's always money. And it rewards us in that, and we become dependent on those monies. And then we have whole industries, whether they are construction, whether they're telecom, whether they're educational industries, who have built their entire business model around that state spend. And now they have a vested interest in keeping that going and bamboozling the public and keeping the public disinterested in it. And there's a trickle down there. There's a trickle down there to every local, and we're about to get into the whole school board thing. We're going to talk about this article with Bill Elam next. But it trickles down, and the most egregious example we're looking at right now is the local school boards. And that's part of the problem, folks. And again, I know I'm preaching to the choir. You folks are engaged. You're understanding. You're doing your best to attempt to understand what's going on. You're calling for fiscal restraint and certainty and a long-term fiscal plan. But most Alaskans don't care. They don't care. They're struggling enough because, again, there is no bolstering of the private economy. There is no balance because the private economy is an afterthought in this state. So most of them are struggling so much that the idea of any other, any taxes, I'll die. I'll have to move out of state. It just becomes terrifying. It just reinforces the system that's already in place. And until we get more people involved and engaged in this, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I don't know if we can get there from here. I don't know if we can peel more people away from their telephones or their TVs or social media or from their day-to-day jobs to actually take a deeper look at this and understand that they have got to get engaged to fix this. because I can look at what's going on at the national level and see the same thing happening at the national level. Now, Doge and Trump and some of those things are turning around, and there's an appetite for that. We've seen that in the election of Trump and the support of things like Doge and the ideas and the reduction. We're seeing there is somewhere out there is a core of people, in the independent, conservative and independent sides who are like, yes, I live in my means, you should live in your means, government. But then there's another vast swath of people who are just like, I don't care. As long as I get the government milk, I'm okay. Okay. We're gonna, is that me or is that the caffeine talking? It's, Brad it's just set me off this morning that I'm frustrated, people. And I'm sure you are too. I've been talking about this for 25 years. Now, I've gotten better at it. I've refined some of my arguments. I've grown. I've had to live through a lot of this. But I was essentially saying the same thing when I first broke the microphone on this program 25 years ago. You can't spend more than you're taking in and expect that it's going to work out. Now, it's taken 25 years to get to this point. Maybe it'll take another 25 years before the wheels come totally off the bus. I don't know. I've given up trying to predict these things in a lot of ways. I can tell you that the PFD is going to be gone, but what does that mean for the rest of the spending, et cetera, et cetera. All right. We're going to jump over, and I'm going to talk about this article from Bill Elam here in just a moment. And we're going to I'm going to peel back the layers on this a little bit and give you some of my thoughts. Then we're going to be joined by Chris Story. Got it? Got it. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, I see what you're doing. I see that I depressed some of you. This is why I always say, don't grow weary in well-doing. This, what's the what's the phrase? Nolite te de bastardes carborundum. Nolite te bastardes carborundum. Don't let the bastards grind you down. That's that's where we are. Don't let them grind you down, because that's what they count on. And again, now that we have whole systems that are built up around government spending, right? They're like symbiotes. They've gotten in there, and now they're leeching off they're build whole systems to where they're leeching off the government system, and they're building whole things, and they definitely don't want you to try and take back, public control of what's going on. And I know a lot of people have thrown in the towel. I know people have done it. But you have two options. Well, I guess you have three options. One option is to just give up. Just stop paying attention and just go about your life. And I mean, I guess it reminds me of the Matrix, right? Why, oh, why didn't I take the blue pill? Ignorance is bliss. I guess there's an argument for that. Just stop paying attention to it all and just live your life and do what you can do. I'm not built that way. I have to fight, right? So that's the second way, is you fight it in every way that you can. But then there's a third way. And the third way is, you know that this plane is going down. You might as well accelerate it. You might as well fight your way to the cockpit and then point the stick straight at the ground. Let's get it over with. Maybe that's the third way. I mean, I know it's disappointing. It's frustrating when you see something that other people don't seem to see or care about. And that's, I think that's why people walk away. Because things that are so obvious to them, and obviously to us, that the simple truth of, if I hear one more person say, well, you can't run a government like you run a household budget. Well, you should. You should. In broad strokes, you definitely should be running a government like you run a household budget, at least, or a business, one of the two. Maybe not a household budget, because in business you've got amortized expenses and capital expenses and things like that. So maybe more like a business than a house, but they should be comparable. But yeah. Brian says, at some level, I think most people understand where we are at financially, but there's just enough doubt sown by the political class to keep us in our place. And I would agree with that. People doubt themselves because, I'm not an expert. I'm not a politician. I can feel, I think most people have a feel. They understand that they have that feeling that, well, this is not right. But they've been convinced that we need the experts in there to do it for us. And the experts, of course, who have a self-interest in perpetuating the system, are saying, oh, nothing to see here. Move along. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. These are not the droids you're looking for, right? And we've been convinced just enough that we don't have the horsepower or the mental aptitude to deal with this. We don't have the expertise. And we really need those experts in there. Hey, we got along just fine in this country for the first 100 years without experts.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Okay. Welcome back to the program, The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. I really depressed some people in the chat room. I really did. All right, I want to get into this opinion piece, which I've posted a link up in the chat room. I guess I'll do it one more time. If you want to go look for it, you can find it over at facebook.com/MichaelDukeShow/live, or you could just peel over to the Peninsula Clarion and look for the opinion piece from Bill Elam. It's titled, Education Accountability Starts at Home, Not Just in Juneau, with the slug line of, hyper-partisan politics don't belong in classrooms. Well, yeah, I would agree with that. Although I don't know how calling for accountability in the money that's being spent and looking for better educational outcomes for our kids is a hyper-partisan issue, but okay. All right. Okay. In principle, I can agree with the slug line. But I don't, when you say that, I don't think it means quite what you say it means. He starts off by talking about how there's lots of strong opinions in Alaska about public education, but he says there's not enough honest conversations, which, I would agree with. We've had a lot of honest conversations trying to peel back the layers of the onion and see what's going on down there, so I would agree with that. If we want real solutions that improve student outcomes and respect taxpayers, We need to ask hard questions. Where does the money come from and where should it go? Who makes the decisions and where should accountability truly live? He's getting into the core of this. The state of Alaska provides nearly 60% of all K-12 education funding. This is, this reads right back to what Brad was just talking about. Most states, it's a much smaller amount, like 45%. But here in Alaska, 60%. He said that support must be stable and predictable so our students and teachers aren't left in limbo. This is the predictability aspect. This is why this is the justification for the BSA increase and just giving them the money. But he says there are many folks that don't realize the remaining 40% comes from local taxpayers. Now, he's kind of simplified this because he hasn't included the 20% that comes from the federal government. He's not apparently counting the federal government funds. Maybe he's just talking about the combined. Maybe he's excluded the federal funds from this. I don't know. But the remaining 40% comes from local taxpayers through property taxes, sales tax, and borough appropriations. Here in the Kenai, the borough is contributing $63 million. That's up to the state cap. Combined with the $82 million in state support, the school receives $146 million this year, with a 43-57 local to state funding split. He says that's not just significant, it's intentional. Our community is intended to be invested in our schools, and that means we should have a strong say in how they're run. Well, as far as I know, you really have the only say in how they're run. There's some directives from the state from time to time, but the local school boards are the ones that get a chance to manage and talk about what they're saying. Now he starts talking my language because he says, I've said it before, money alone doesn't guarantee better results. Well, I'm glad you acknowledge that, although I'm still trying to decide this increase that you just voted for. Okay, all right, but pouring more dollars into a system without demanding results doesn't serve our kids. Okay, well then why did you vote for this bill? Because it has no accountability. Okay, I mean, you're saying the right things, but you're walking in a totally different direction. So I'm trying to understand that. He goes on to say, that's why I support local control and with it, local accountability. And then he says, it's not enough to point fingers at the state. Well, thank God. I mean, the state's just the money man at this point, right? And the state has direct constitutional obligations to do this kind of stuff. And maybe and here's the thing. I'm just looking at the time, and I know I'm not going to have the time that I really want to get into on this. But let me just point this out. When the local bodies of control, and I'm talking about the school boards, when the local bodies of control show a complete and utter lack of interest in being financially responsible, and what I mean is understanding where they're at fiscally. We've talked about this before, looking at the local enrollment rate, understanding that that's continuing to drop, that they're building, that they had many more students in the past, and that they're going to have less students in the future, and that's predicted to decline, and refusing to acknowledge that as a factor of their fiscal planning, to acknowledge that they're going to have to shrink their footprint. They're going to have to shrink their spend because they're going to have fewer students, and because they're paid on a per student basis, there's going to be less money, and you're also going to have inflation on top of that. But refusing to do that, it's more like a spoiled teenager. Well, I want my money and I want it now. And I want it to be the way that it always has been, and I want it now. And I don't really care what it takes, and we're not planning on getting smaller. We're planning on staying the same, even though we should be getting small. You have to have a responsible, reasonable, rational parent in the room. Now, I didn't want to use this analogy to say that the state of Alaska is the parent, because the state of Alaska's got its own teenage tantrums going on in the legislature. But this is part of the problem. When I agree with him, there should be local control. There should be local accountability. The problem that we're seeing over and over and over again is a complete and utter failure to acknowledge that the system, the education system, is in decline for enrollment, right? Therefore, the funding is going to be in decline. And you're going to be fighting both that declining enrollment and the inflationary component, which is going to put more pressure on it. The money's going to not go as far because of inflation, and you're not going to get as much money because you have a declining enrollment. Therefore, you're going to have to make some very hard decisions. But because, as I talked about in the last segment, we've become so inured to that in the state, and we are so wrapped up in the fact that, oh, we've got as much money as we could ever, that nobody wants to make those hard decisions. They want to point the finger back at the state, as Elam just said. It's not enough to point the finger at the state. And he's right. This goes back to an issue of the local boards putting unrealistic expectations on themselves without taking into account all the factors of things like inflation and loss of students. And again, this is just yet another spin-off, another benefit, another dividend of people who have become so dependent on the system and so inured to the cost of government because they don't have to pay for it directly, because of the stealth tax, because of the hidden tax of all the money going to the state first, or even a subliminal tax of taking the PFD. They're so inured to it, they just have no concept of the supply and just give us more money. And it should be. I don't just blame the legislature. And we've been talking about this. I am blaming the local management units, the school boards. They're the ones that decide these things, that make these plans, that put these budgets together. Where are the voices on the school board that reaches out to the finance director when they're putting these budgets together and say, hey, plan, make sure you factor in the number of fewer students that we have and that we should plan for the worst case scenario instead of the best case? Where are those voices? And maybe we should get the federal government out of the education business in the state, thereby eliminating the whole cap and mandate on how much local communities can spend on their education. Because if a local community wants to dedicate 50% of their revenue to they should be able to do that. But as long as they take that federal monies, there's the whole equity thing and all that other kind of stuff. But again, this all goes back to those local people taking responsibility for what's going on. And that's the rub, isn't it? The rub is taking responsibility. And that's the problem. They haven't taken responsibility heretofore. Because of declining enrollment and everything else, they just always bet on the best case scenario and not the worst case scenario. All right, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Chris Story joins us up next. We return right after this.
Your mental suppository. The Michael Duke Show.
Well, I mean, it's all I got to say. Okay. Chris Story is our guest, and he is already in the chat room there. Hello, sir. How are you this morning?
Morning. Doing great. I'm just trying to figure out why, whenever it's going to be my segment, you use the enema bump or now a mental suppository. I'm trying to figure out, is there a correlation? Is there causation and correlation here, or is it just merely a conspiracy? I'm not sure.
It's just in honor of you. No, it's fine. Anyway, welcome to the program, my friend. How are you doing? How was your week?
Great. Spent a couple days over in Seward last week, and Yep, fantastic. Seward's my home away from Homer. I like to go over there and play tourist. You just put on your cleanest boots you've got and a nice jacket, and they treat you like you're from out of state and a tourist. And since I don't know anybody over there, I mean, I have a couple of friends over there, but they're busy working, so they're not. I don't see them, and you just get treated like a tourist in your own backyard. It's fantastic. I love it.
Put on your boots and your long jacket. I see
Oh,
how it is over there.
Speaking of which, of course, I tuned in our camper. I tuned in, of course, to KPEN and enjoyed all of that your beautiful country station has to offer there. Comes in so loud, so clear, so beautiful. I've got a couple of recommendations that I'd love to hear on the air. There's a Flamingo Lounge. What an amazing restaurant! If you haven't been, you've got to go. And they would be so smart to advertise and get people from around the peninsula to come over year round. And then also another little place called the Gold Rush Cafe, and we're sitting in there, and it's some of the best fish and chips you've ever had. And I asked the waitress, I said, "Oh, is this a new restaurant?" She goes, "Mm-hmm, yeah, 17 years ago." Like, what? I go to Seward all the time. How have I never tried the Gold Rush Cafe? It was fantastic. So those are my two picks.
How did I never? That's when you tell them. That's when you tell them business goes where it's invited. I mean, how many
Exactly.
times have people said, "Are you new?" No, we've been
Right.
around for years. Yeah, exactly. People just don't know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's good. Thank you for the heads up on that. We'll talk about that. By the way, there and I don't mean to get too technical with the listeners and everything on the air with us on the line with us here, but is your Roadcaster a Roadcaster Pro, or is it a Duo, or what is it?
It's a pro.
Okay. All right. Because there's a new function that allows us to talk Roadcaster to Roadcaster. I'll talk to you about that.
Oh, no kidding. Maybe even eliminate the Comrex altogether.
Yeah. No, it came out like 5 days ago. It's a new piece of software where we can just, you don't have to dial
I
in.
could potentially up.
Yeah. It's a new patch. So anyway, we'll talk about that. I just saw it yesterday or Sunday. I saw the video on it, and I updated my Roadcaster, and it's right there. So anyway, we'll
We
talk
are
about
in the golden age, my friend, a golden age
Oh,
of
man.
technology.
I got to tell you, the technology, if you'd have told me 10 years ago that this is where we would be today, 10 years ago, I started broadcasting the show on Periscope, which most people don't know what Periscope is. That was a Twitter experiment to start live video. They didn't want it directly on Twitter, so they created it. And it wasn't anything fancy. You literally start your tablet and it would record me there in the studio. They couldn't hear the bumper music. They couldn't hear anything else. And I started broadcasting with that. That was before Facebook Live or anything else. But the technology today is so amazing. The things we can do, it's just fantastic. So it's going to be good. Is this really Mike and Chris, or is it AI with the new patch? We're all AI. We're all living in a simulation. You didn't realize that, right? Right? We're all living in a simulation. Anyway, Chris, what is our topic for today, my friend? Before I start just flying around, what's our topic?
And thank God I've got one. Power of patience, because I need it with you. The power of patience.
Power of patience. You need it with me? Where's my dear reader part? That's what I want to know. Where's the power?
Yeah. But see, you've intimidated me because you create this incredible audio quality, and I'm just worried I'm not going to be able to live up to that. So you've really
Why
set a
don't you
high
just
bar.
come up here to the station and we'll record it in one take up at this?
Okay.
Just
all
come
right,
up.
done. I'll do that.
All right.
Fine.
Just stop doing just fiddle farting around. All right. Okay. Thank you for bringing I've been angry, not angry. I've been agitated. And
what?
I don't want to say angry because angry just sounds bad, but I'm just, it's the frustration factor is, I think, what gets us. And maybe you need to do a whole thing on turning frustrate. Maybe you can give me some pointers on turning frustration into fuel or something like, I don't know. I'm sure you'll think of something clever on that regard. So, but we'll get to it. All right. We're 15 seconds out. Chris Story, the man from Homer. Like and share, like and follow. And a bunch of people dropped off because I stopped being angry. See, that doesn't bode well. I don't want to be. I don't.
The Michael Duke Show, proudly splitting the left versus right dichotomy. Yeah, I had to look that word up too. I don't think it means what he thinks it means. Here he is, though. That guy, Michael Dukes, the one with the show. Chris Story, the obnoxiously positive and sometimes hilarious man from Homer, joins us every week to talk about pottery, positivity, and how not to become a nihilist. We're looking at you, Eric. It's the Michael Dukes Show.
Sorry, that's an inside joke. Eric is my former producer, and he is a bit of a nihilist, unfortunately. But Chris was always here to pump him up, and that's what it's all about. Chris Story, the man from Homer. I love Homer. Alaska.com is where you'll find everything Chris Story. It's as much as you can take and then some. He comes on every week to give us a power of positivity lesson, a life coaching lesson. Today, it is the power of patience, and mine's kind of worn thin, brother. So we probably needed this today. Hit me with it.
There must have been a force in the universe that told me Dukes is losing his mind. He's losing his patience. He's going out of his tree. And it reminds me, Jim Rohn talked a lot about patience in his books and his platform speeches. And he said there are two kinds of patience. And it kind of helps me to frame the idea of applying patience in your real life by applying it these two different ways. The first kind of patience is what allows you to plant a garden. You plant the seeds, and then you trust that the time it's going to take is what it takes, and you allow your investment, you allow your garden, whatever it is, you plant those seeds, and then you allow it to grow. You're active. You're not just sitting by, you're watering, you're weeding, you're fertilizing, but it's not going to be rushed. It's going to take the time it takes to develop a garden. There's things like photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is easy for me to say, Michael. I'm not going to try to go over your head with technological scientific terms. I'm just going to say it takes patience, and we all know it. Nobody plants a seed and expects it to grow tomorrow. Okay. Second kind of patience. This is the kind of patience that you must exercise when you're standing in line and not getting frustrated. You're waiting on the pot of water to boil without tapping your foot and pacing the room and screaming at the top of your lungs. And it's this kind of space and patience that we allow in our relationships also to become deeper and better relationships with children, parents, friends, colleagues, coworkers, cohorts, whatever it is. When you have this second kind of patience, and you can summon that patience, and you create a superpower, especially when you combine the two. Look, your investments are going to take the time they're going to take to grow and to become what it is you hope to take into retirement. Your life is going to go in a certain way and grow in a certain way based on the seeds you've planted, and along the way continue to plant and weed the garden and fertilize and water. But these two kinds of patience together create a superpower. And again, you cannot rush raising your child. You cannot rush going through an illness. You need to go through it the way you have to go through it, with the positivity and all the mental outlook you can summon. But be patient. Give yourself time. Give your investments time. I think when we rush investments, this is when you'll lose everything on a crypto bet because you didn't really understand it, but you were in a hurry to get rich. Or you buy the wrong property, you're going to flip it, but you rushed it. You didn't do the due diligence to find out the foundation was no good, or whatever it is. Patience applied is a superpower.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that, that all the euphemisms or axioms or whatever, good things come to those who wait, and all the things that but patience, my ass, I want to kill something, I want to do it now, and we're in this society today where delayed gratification is I want to be famous now, kind of thing. And so it's very hard for us in this society of instant gratification for us to really dig into that and to be patient and to look at the long term. Nobody wants to look 10 years down the road, right? They want it today. And that's part of the
problem. Or 2 minutes.
Yeah, or 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Exactly. I'm helping my dad. My dad's building a sunroom for my mom up at their house. And, my dad's been building all his life. He's now 82 years old, and he's still building, and he's building this beautiful sunroom. And I'm like, wow, it's just step by step by step. He knows the exact next step. He knows, and he's patient with it. He's not moving as fast as he used to, but he's getting it done board by board. So I'm up on the rafters the other day, and we're trying to adhere the barge rafter to these tails, and it's the very end of it is misaligned by eighth of an inch, Michael, an eighth of an inch. In my world, that's perfect. Nail it. But in his world, no. He gets down off the ladder. He comes back with a couple of clamps. Meanwhile, I'm just standing up there on top of this building, waiting, and just going out of my mind. And he climbs back up the ladder. He takes two clamps and puts them on in two different directions. And it took about 5 minutes from noticing it to completing it, but it aligned perfectly. And he goes, "Okay, now nail it." Boom, boom, nail it. It's perfect. But
Right.
I just was in such a rush. I'm like, come on, this is close enough. But that's not the way he builds things. And that's why
Right.
they last. And that's why, it just really taught me a quick lesson. Like, okay, just slow down. Just hold on a second. We can do better than getting within an eighth of an inch. We can get
Right.
this square.
Right. 5 minutes now pays off in an additional 5 to 10 years of wear, right? I mean, 5 minutes, but we don't look at it like that. We want the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. That's what we're always looking at. And how do we develop this patience, Chris? Because it's obviously you're still struggling with it. I know that I struggle with it from time to time. How do we develop both of those kinds of patience?
You know what's interesting is we all admire companies that are 100+ years old. We all admire an oak tree that could be 200 years old, or a redwood that could be older than that, or a sequoia. We admire these things that are deeply rooted, that started with just a little tiny seed and then built something massive over time. The Grand Canyon is one. I'm reading a book right now called The Emerald Mile. It's amazing just thinking about what it took to create the Grand Canyon. Everything we admire took patience. Every life. I'm reading Gabler's biography of Walt Disney. I just got it in, and it's fantastic. You look at his life and you think, oh man, it built slowly over time. He wasn't Walt Disney overnight. Nobody that we admire truly has done anything absent patience. Unless you're going to go out of your tree, you're going to jump out of that oak tree. So you know what helps me? On my phone, since I'm not on social media anymore. It's fantastic. But I get these updates on my phone, and pictures that I've taken over the years will just pop up, and it'll just be like little memories on my own phone. And I'll look back at, say, the vacation we took the kids on last year, our grandkids, and Michael, they are vastly different than they were a year and 2 months ago. They look different. Our grandkids are growing by the minute. And it's like, okay, if I start to lose some patience with let's say the 16-year-old in particular, hold on. Just remember last year he was the little boy, and now he's like a 16-year-old man that knows everything, and he's almost achieved Alice Cooper's 18, baby's brain and an old man's heart. But it's like, oh, okay, just the remembrance that this too shall pass. Live in the present, and but just be cognizant that this struggle is going to be something you look back on with fondness, and that helps
Well,
me build on these kinds of patience, the two different
and
kinds.
I think a change of mindset. Like I said, most people are not looking at 10 years down the road. But if you start to try and think of things and frame things in the terms of 5 years or 10 years or 15 or 20, however depending on how old you are, if you start framing things in those terms, then patience becomes a little easier because you realize that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Right. But again,
Yeah.
that's the hard thing, is looking at things from that long-term perspective, because we're so enamored with now that we're not thinking about. But if we can start to look at those things and set 5-year goals and 10-year goals and 15-year goals, then those things can change. We have 45 seconds here, Chris. Final thoughts.
Patience isn't passive. It requires you be doing something. You got to be found doing something when success comes calling. You can't just sit. So patience isn't passive, but apply patience in every area of your life, and you will find the power of that patience as a superpower.
Chris Story, you can find him at ilovehomeralaska.com. Podcast, books, writings, probably his pottery too. I don't know, pretty much everything. And you can listen to him today starting at 1 p.m. here down on the peninsula on KPEN and KGTL. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1 p.m. Tune in and be there. Chris, thank you, my friend. Appreciate you coming on board.
Thank you, Michael.
Out of time, folks. We'll see you tomorrow. All right. Any final thoughts, Chris, before I let you go? I kind of rushed you there at the end. I'm sorry. I got into it and
No worries.
lost track of the clock.
No, I think it was a great conversation. I enjoyed it. And yeah, I just think the idea of passivity is a mistake. I think the tree, well, let's just take the oak tree, for example. It's doing something. It's constantly gathering. It's reaching as high as it can possibly go and grow. And I think that's emblematic of us. It's patience, but it isn't passive. We need to be doing along the way. Same with relationships or your growth in your career or exercise, whatever it is. You can be patient, but be active.
Right. But having that plan can help you because then you're always thinking or working, even when you're being patient on something else, your long-term plan is always sitting there in the background. And that's what I love about it. All right, Chris.
Got it, buddy.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you coming on board. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Catch you later.
Folks, we're out of time. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Be kind, love one another, live well.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.